And welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I'm your host, Demo, and this is Brewing with Underwhelming Commanders, Episode 2. So first off, I pinned a comment to the last episode where I said that doing 5 commanders in, 5 deck techs in a single episode is too much, especially if I want to do one every week. I kind of want to do one of these every week. So I'm going down to 3 commanders. But as I said in the last video, I'll eventually will get to everyone. I really think that I'll probably do this series forever. And doing 3 commanders per episode, eventually I imagine I will get to every single commander that's ever been printed, So it's 3 commanders, and again, for those who didn't watch the last one, the first 2 I'm going to give a rundown. What direction would I go? The main cards that I would be playing, just to give you a really good head start. And then the winner of the poll, the one that got the most votes, is going to get an actual deck list. So starting out this week with Triad of Fates. And this is a really interesting card. When I was talking about Fane the Broker and how Fane the Broker I thought maybe was the first creature that had 3 tap abilities on it. Triad of Fates has 3 tap abilities on it. That's a lot of tap abilities. It's 2 black, white, human wizard, 3/3, and you pay a colorless, tap it, put a fate counter on target creature, pay a white and tap it, exile target creature that has a fate counter on it, then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control, right? So more commonly known as blinking. And then pay a black and tap it, exile target creature that has a fate counter on it. Its controller draws 2 cards. So a lot to unpack here. First things first, we have a commander with a tap ability, and I say it all the time, 1,000-Year Elixir's got to go in here. I also think Mage Right Stone. This even more so because we have a commander that is tapping so much and we need to be tapping it more than once in order to sort of get the effect we want. The untapping thing really is important here, I think. So that's why we want as many of those effects as we can. Also, Lightning Greaves, Crashing Drawbridge, right? Being able to use that effect as soon as it comes into play rather than I play it, got to wait a whole nother turn, then I use the first ability, then I got to wait a whole nother turn, then I use the second ability. Like, we just can't be having that. That's way too long to actually get one effect out of this guy. We preferably want to put a fate counter on something right away and then immediately untap it and then use one of those exile effects, right? So the first card I thought of when I saw this, because I really, Triad of Fates is one of the cards that I haven't really given a deep look at before. But as soon as I saw Fate Counter, I thought Oblivion Stone. Oblivion Stone uses fate counters, right? And yes, this will work because Oblivion Stone says sacrifice Oblivion Stone, destroy each non-land permanent without a fate counter on it. You can also use your Oblivion Stone to put fate counters on stuff that you want to use your Triad of Fates ability for. It's interchangeable both ways, so that card is definitely going in the deck. Nesting Grounds I think is also really good. Again, I had mentioned this in my 30 colorless lands video, and it was pretty high on the list because the ability there is so unique. Being able to move any kind of counter from creature to creature I think is really, really good. If we don't have any creatures in play that we want to target with one of our commander's abilities, we can just put a fate counter on our Triad of Fates or any creature and then move it later on, right? I did put Fane the Broker in the deck, and the reason I put Fane the Broker in the deck is because I think a lot of the abilities here work. Being able to make a token I think is really good. Sacrificing creatures. There's a lot of things that will overlap here, as you'll see. And because we have all these untapping effects, Fane the Broker also works. Any creature that has lots of tapping abilities will work in this deck because we have so many things that can untap our creatures, right? So the obvious direction to go here, and I think what most people have done with Triad of Fates, is a blink deck. They use that second ability of blink your creature and it comes back into play. And you could do that, and I definitely put some creatures in here like Ravenous Chupacabra, Noxious Gearhulk, creatures that are just great creatures anyway that we could put in the deck. I was thinking Ashen Rider, Angel of Despair, right? Those are great creatures to blink. But I don't want to just make this a blinking deck. I really like that second ability, okay? Yes, you can just exile your opponent's creature, but then they get to draw 2 cards. I don't think we want to do that. Black and white are fantastic at removal, probably the best color combination for removal, especially with creatures. I mean, if you're playing a black-white deck, your options for removing creatures are endless. So I don't think we're ever going to want to exile an opponent's creature with that last ability. Giving them the card advantage just doesn't make sense. So that last ability I want to use for ourselves. I want to exile our creatures and we get to draw 2 cards. And of course we want to do that with tokens. So I was thinking let's blink stuff that gives us tokens, right? So Nadir is just, I mean, I don't know how many decks I'm going to put this guy in. Maybe I'll just keep putting him in decks until the end of time. I gush over him all the time. He goes in so many decks because he cares about so many different things and he works with so many different strategies. In this deck, he is fantastic, okay? We can play him, and he has a leaves the battlefield effect. So what we can do is we can blink him with one of our blink effects, and when he leaves the battlefield, he's going to create some tokens for us. Then those tokens we can then exile to draw cards with, right? So we can do both things with him. We can even just exile him if we want, draw 2 cards, and he's going to give us the tokens, and then we can exile those as well. He's just fantastic in this deck. Angel of Invention, Chittering Witch, right? You can just use any creature essentially that you want that is going to ETB and give you tokens, because then you can blink it, right? We're going to use both of our commander's abilities here. We blink the creature that creates the tokens, and the tokens we'll exile to draw cards. I threw Ephemerate in here. Why not? I mean, that card can just be good to save your commander if you need to, right? Athreos, though, I think is really good in this deck. I actually made a black-white Athreos sort of blink deck with all these cards like Ashen Rider and Angel of Despair. In this situation, it's going to work particularly fantastic, okay? Because we have our Angel of Despair out. We put a fate counter on it, and then we use that third ability and exile it to draw 2 cards. And it already has a coin counter on it from our Athreos, so when it gets exiled, it comes back into play. That's what makes Athreos so fantastic in this deck, is because now we can exile creatures that we actually want to get back, and Athreos will bring them back into play, so that works fantastic. I got Illusionist Bracers and Rings of Brighthearth, right? We really want to be using our commander's abilities as much as we can without having to wait another turn and wait another turn, and untapping effects are great, but Illusionist Bracers will give us 2 of those effects, right? So what we can do now is we can put a fate counter on target creature, and we put 2 fate counters, right? So we'll put a fate counter on one of our tokens and then another of our tokens. Or we'll put a fate counter on a token we want to exile and draw cards with, and we'll put a fate counter on our Angel of Despair that we want to blink, right? And so that we could do them both at later times. Rings of Brighthearth, same thing. We'll just copy that ability and we'll put 2 fate counters, or we'll exile 2 tokens and draw 4 cards, whatever the case may be. Preacher, this is a really interesting one. 1 white human cleric. It's a 1/1, and you may choose not to untap Preacher during your untap step. You tap for as long as Preacher remains tapped, gain control of target creature and opponent's choice they control. So what happens is you tap this and an opponent is going to choose a creature, right? This is just an interesting card. So they're going to choose their worst creature. Okay, whatever. But we gain control of it, and now it's a creature we control, so we can exile it and draw 2 cards off of it, right? So we're getting rid of our opponent's creatures and we're drawing the cards, so we get both benefits. Then we can let it untap again, grab another creature. So I think that's a great fit in the deck. Hero of Bredegard. We are exiling stuff all over the place, right? Whenever you exile 1 or more cards from your hand, not really what we're doing, but permanents from the battlefield, we're doing that all the time, right? We're going to put that many +1/+1 counters on Hero of Bredegard. So every time we exile, and we have lots of other exile effects, right? Hero of Bredegard could go in almost any mono white or Orzhov deck, just because those decks are usually exiling a lot with paths and swords and all that kind of stuff. So every time we blink one of our creatures or exile one of our creatures, we're going to be putting a counter on it. If it has 5 or more counters, it gets flying and it's an angel. And if it has 10 or more counters, it's an indestructible god. Not too shabby. So great fit in the deck. But moving on to the next one. Coming in at number 2 was Dakkon, Blackblade. Had a lot of requests for this one, interestingly enough. I guess people just find it interesting to have an ESPER commander whose power and toughness is equal to the number of lands you control. I mean, really, at the end of the day, it's just a vanilla creature, right? It's just a guy who's going to have a big power and toughness. But I think the fact that it is not green, it's a lands deck that doesn't care about green, is what people are so interested in, because I've gotten a lot of requests for this one. So the obvious stuff, I mean, Stoic Farmer, Archaeomancer's Map, right? All of the great white ramp cards of late. You know, I talk about enough with the white ramp cards, but I'm sure anyone with a Dakkon Blackblade deck is going to be like, no, we want more, we want more. Also stuff like Gift of Estates, Thematic Compass, right? They're going to go get lands out of your deck, and they work with Archaeomancer's Map. That's what makes that card so fantastic, is a lot of these cards that go get lands out of your deck, white cards that do that, you're going to have them in your hand, and then Archaeomancer's Map is maybe going to let them go into play. We got to be careful here, though. The problem with this deck is that a lot of these white go get land effects require your opponents to have more than you. And if we're putting lots of lands into play, then our opponents aren't going to have more than us. At least not, I mean, they might if they're playing a hardcore ramp deck, but maybe they won't. And then a lot of these cards like Gift of Estates will just be dead draws, right? They won't be doing anything. Dreamscape Artist is good. Sword of the Animist is good because those will go get us lands no matter what. But I'm not going to talk about the ramp here. I mean, obviously you want to be putting lots of lands in play. That part of the deck is kind of obvious, and I don't think we need to really talk about that. I also don't really think we need to talk about the Voltron part of the deck, right? Which is the other way that I think a lot of people will go with this is I'm just going to make a big, huge creature and then I'm going to put some Voltron pieces on it, maybe make it unblockable and attack with it, right? I think people get all of that. Some of the other things, I think that when I'm doing these videos, my ideas that are maybe a little out of the norm are probably more what people want. So what I would do if I was making this deck, first of all, I'd put some other stuff in here that cares about lands. Yeah, you can do landfall stuff, but why not put Cosima in here, right? That's a card that really cares about you getting lots of land drops. So I think that goes in the deck. Also can end up being a really, really big creature as well. So maybe that fits with what else you're doing. Herald of Leshrac an interesting one. There's not a lot of decks that fits in. It does cost 7 mana, right? It's 7 mana flyer, 2/4. It has one of the most interesting abilities you'll ever see. Cumulative upkeep, gain control of a land you don't control. Then it gets +1/+1 for each land you control but don't own. And when it leaves play, you give all those lands back essentially, right? So basically what's going to happen is on your first upkeep, you gain control of one opponent's land. Just any opponent, you take one of their lands. And then, with cumulative upkeep, the way it works is the next time it's 2 and the next time it's 3. So if you can keep this guy in play for a while, he's going to steal a lot of your opponent's lands. It's just a great way to get extra lands. It's a funny card. It fits in this deck, so why not throw it in there? Trench Behemoth is another one that I really like. That fits in a ESPER landfall theme if you're doing that kind of thing. Again, it's a big, beefy creature. We want a few of them. If we're going to go my big creature is going to be smacking my opponents, it'd be good to have a few in here. Ruin Ghost is an interesting one. If you're doing a landfall theme in white, exile target land you control, then return to the battlefield. Like it just blinks a land. It blinks one of your lands. That's it. So you get a landfall trigger. However, what I want to do with this deck, I want to do something a little different. I thought, what is the best possible way we can ramp in ESPER colors? Because really that's what we want to do here, right? We want to get a whole bunch of lands in play so that our commander is gigantic and whatever else we can take advantage of. Having lots of lands in play is easy. It's easy to take advantage of that, right? I did a lot of research and the best way I thought to do that was with Planar Birth, okay? Planar Birth is a 1 and a white sorcery. Return all basic lands from all graveyards to the battlefield tapped under their owner's control. This to me is the best way that a white or ESPER deck can get a whole bunch of lands into play all at once. This is going to return all basic lands, only basic, from all graveyards to the battlefield. Now, your opponents are probably not going to take advantage of this at all right? If you're worried about your opponents getting a bunch of lands into play, not likely unless they're doing a deck that's self-milling, then maybe. For us, I think you really could just build your deck around this one card, okay? And if you want to make a more interesting Dakkon Blackblade deck, this is the way to do it, right? We're in ESPER colors. So the cards that you can use to tutor for this, it's endless, right? Spellseeker will go get this. Solve the Equation, the card from Strixhaven that I like so much, will go get this. Any black tutor will go get this. There's lots of ways to get this card in your hand. And what we can do is we can just loot. We can loot like crazy, right? Cast Frantic Search and stuff like that. Dump a whole bunch of basic lands, maybe 10 basic lands in our graveyard. After we've already done that, we go get this, cast it, and wham, we got 10 more lands in play, right? Vanish into Memory is another one that's a favorite of mine. That's great for that. This card I think just works really good in the deck because if we have our commander out, we can Vanish into Memory it. It's great because it can save your commander from removal. You get to draw, like say our commander's an 8/8, we get to draw 8 cards, then when he comes back into play, we can discard 8 cards, but also we can just put him in the command zone. If we want, we can just Vanish into Memory our commander. And instead of putting him in exile, we put him in the command zone, which means we don't have to discard anything. We just draw all those cards. It basically sort of turns into a Momentous Fall in a way, right? Where you're just sacrificing your creature to draw a bunch of cards. Another neat little thing we can do to sort of cheat lands into play is with Second Sunrise and Faith's Reward. And I don't know if I would go both of these directions. It would be tough because with Second Sunrise and Faith's Reward, what you want to do is you want a bunch of sack lands, right? You want fetch lands, you want Evolving Wilds, stuff like that. that, right? And the idea is you sack 2 or 3, and then you second Sunrise, you get them all back so you can do it again. That's a different way to go, right? And you could use Sun Titan, get lands back out of your graveyard. Trove Warden does this. Savine's Reclamation will do this. There's lots of stuff in white that will just get those lands back out of your graveyard and put them back into play. To me, I don't want to do both because Planar Birth wants basic lands, so we're going to be running a lot of basic lands in our deck if we do Planar Birth. The second Sunrise version is going to want us to have more non-basic lands, right? Fetch lands and sack lands and stuff like that. So I don't know if you want to do both with that. And then once we have that big, huge creature, again, we got a huge vanilla creature. A couple other things you could do with it. Sure Strike Trident, which I just mentioned in my Evra deck, is another way that it can just sit there and we can just shoot our opponents with our commander. A card like Rite of Consumption, 1 and a black sorcery, as an additional cost to cast it, you sacrifice a creature. So we sacrifice our Dakkon, deals damage equal to its power to target player or planeswalker, and you gain life equal to damage dealt this way. So we can just shoot an opponent for like 8 or 10 damage, gain 10 life, and always be looking at creature types, right? Dakkon is a human warrior. Okay, so whenever you're making an underwhelming commander, that's one of the first things I do when I see an underwhelming commander that really there's not much to work with. I look at the creature type and I go, okay, well, what can I do with that? Human and warrior are pretty popular creature types. So General's Enforcer is an auto include in this deck. It's going to make our commander indestructible. Irration Foremost is really good. 1 white, double strike 2/2. Human warrior. When Irration Foremost enters the battlefield or attacks another target warrior you control, gains double strike until end of turn. This should be in every Dakkon deck because I imagine most Dakkon decks are going to be Voltron style, right? So this comes into play, gives your Dakkon double strike because it's a warrior. And then you swing with it. And if it's a, I guess, what, an 11/11? If you have it up to an 11 power, it's a one-shot kill. So that's an absolute must, I think, in the deck. Core Blade Master, same thing. This time it's going to give our equipped warriors double strike, and that's likely, I would imagine the Dakkon is probably going to have an equipment on him, so he is going to be an equipped warrior. So again, it's going to give him double strike. And then Raiders Spoils and Mindblade Render. Both of these are going to let us draw cards whenever our warrior, and you could go a little bit more with a warrior theme in this deck, and these cards are just going to let us draw cards every time we connect with a warrior, so I think that works as well. So that is Dakkon Blackblade. Just throwing out, again, I think the Voltron strategy is obvious. I think the, let's put lots of lands into play is pretty obvious. I'm trying to throw out a few other ideas that maybe people could go with, right? And then coming in at number 1 this time is Snapdax. And this one was a little surprising for me. I had just the one guy that had suggested it in the comments that I saw, and I thought, okay, sure, I'll throw it in there. And it got the most amount of votes. It is a mutate commander, right? For anyone who hasn't seen it before, Snapdax Apex of the Hunt. 1, a red, a black, and a white, 3/5 with double strike. But most importantly, it has that mutate. And really, you never want to cast any of these mutate cards not for their mutate. I can't think of any scenario where you don't want to actually cast this for his mutate cost. So it's really 5 mana, 2, a hybrid black-red, and white-white. When this creature mutates, it deals 4 damage. Target creature or planeswalker an opponent controls, and you gain 4 life. So there's 3 things there we can build around. Basically, we can give double strike to a creature, and we also want to build around the fact that it's dealing damage and we're gaining life. And of course, I had to do my research. Like everybody else, basically I understand how mutate works, but I really did my research on this to sort of understand what's going on. And I imagine that's why this and a lot of the other mutate commanders are not very popular, because people just don't get it. They don't still understand. I went to MTG Wiki to sort of look up the rules. I like that site for just sort of going over how certain things work if you don't quite understand. And I picked up a couple of really important ones. Here's one that absolutely blew my mind. A mutating creature spell that resolves doesn't enter the battlefield. It simply merges with the target creature. That blew my mind. And the reason it blew my mind is because, as far as I know, this is the only way that something can enter the battlefield without actually entering the battlefield, right? So your Snapdax, while it's on the stack, is a mutating creature spell. And when it resolves, it will merge with the creature that it's targeting. So you have to have a target, right? It's essentially a spell that targets, and it doesn't actually enter the battlefield. And, when I first saw that, I was like, oh man, you could totally make a deck with like Tainted Aether or Lethal Vapors, cards like that, because you don't actually have a creature entering the, your Snapdax is coming into play, but it's not actually entering the battlefield, so it won't trigger any enter the battlefield effects. I didn't go that route. I just thought that was a bit much, and it would be really difficult. It's an interesting idea if somebody wants to go with it, though. The more important takeaway, though, that I got was an ability that triggers whenever this creature mutates triggers when a mutating creature's spell becomes part of the merged permanent. So what that means is our Snapdax is going to come into play and he's going to merge with that other creature that he's mutating onto, and then it triggers when this creature mutates. And of course, that's incredibly important because that's most of what we're building around with this deck. So that ability of Snapdax, whenever this creature mutates, it deals 4 damage. That's going to happen after it's already merged with the other creature. So what that means is we're going to get the advantages that that other creature already has. So obviously, I think the best route here to go is Death Touch. So I put a ton of Death Touch creatures in here. Falthus, Shadowcat Familiar is a great one. Commanders you control have Menace and Death Touch. And the Death Touch is extra good here, right? Because our commander has Double Strike. So we're getting a double bonus here. So when it shoots another creature, it's going to have Death Touch with the shooting part. So it's going to kill anything it shoots. And then also when it attacks, it's going to have to be blocked with 2 creatures because it has Menace. It's going to do the damage first because it has Double Strike, right? Double Strike and Death Touch work fantastically together. So we're going to shoot both of those creatures that are blocking and we're going to kill them both. And our commander is just never going to take any damage. That's why Death Touch works so good with Double Strike or First Strike. Vampire Nighthawk and Nighthawk Scavenger, again, same thing. They also have flying, so it gives our commander evasion. They also have lifelink, and again, we're dealing damage. We already gain 4 life, but if our creature that we're merging with also has lifelink, we're going to gain 8 life. Grim Dancer and Embodiment of Agonies. Grim Dancer is great. We can give it Menace, Death Touch, or lifelink. So if we want to gain life, we can give it lifelink. Maybe we want to give it Menace though, so that our commander has more evasion. Embodiment of Agonies is particularly fantastic. 1 black flying Death Touch, and it's a 0/0. And this is important, okay? Embodiment of Agonies enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each different mana cost among non-land cards in your graveyard. This is a pretty good card. I've thrown this in a few decks. You know, it can come into play and it can have 4 +1/+1 counters or 5. That's pretty darn good for 3 mana. The important thing here is this. And when I saw this, I was like, man, you could totally go this theme as well. Basically how it works is our commander is going to be the top card and this is going to be the bottom card, and it gets all of the abilities of the card on the bottom. So what Embodiment of Agonies is going to do is it's going to give our commander flying and Death Touch. The other part doesn't matter because our Embodiment of Agonies is already in play, but the +1/+1 counters are already on there and they stay. So you can go that route as well, where you can put a lot of creatures in here with +1/+1 counters and they stack on top of each other essentially, right? I threw Killian Ink Duelist in the deck, and unfortunately he's a human. He has got lifelink and Menace, so he'd be great to merge onto. I made the mistake in my Vadrock deck of putting a couple of humans in there because I had forgotten. And it's funny, the few times I played that deck, I didn't actually have the scenario where I would merge onto those creatures, like Swiftblade Vindicator, right? I never actually had that happen, so I never actually realized that it was a mistake. This is the only human in the deck. You cannot mutate onto it, unfortunately. However, spells you cast that target a creature cost 2 less to cast. Mutating spells target. So Killian works great. Again, unfortunately he's a human, so he doesn't work great with that regard, but the targeting part works great. Mutate is a targeting spell. So our commander is going to cost 2 less. He's only going to cost 3 mana when Killian's out, so it's definitely worth putting him in. I got both Aurelias, Aurelia the War Leader, Aurelia Exemplar of Justice. We're going to be attacking a lot. I mean, this is essentially, I guess, an aggro deck, right? I think because our commander has Double Strike, it won't be hard to close the game out. And these are both fantastic cards to mutate onto, right? Aurelia the War Leader, Flying Vigilance, Haste, add Double Strike onto that. The extra combats ain't too bad either. The other Aurelia might be even better. Snapdax is going to be on top, so it's going to be flying Double Strike. It's going to have the Mentor. But more importantly, at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to 1 target creature you control. We're going to choose our commander. We're going to choose this creature. That creature gets +2/+0, gains trample if it's red, and vigilant if it's white. So it is both. So what we're going to have at the end of the day is a flying Double Strike, trample, vigilance creature. Not too shabby, right? That extra +2/+0, you know, when you have Double Strike, that makes a big difference. Alenda and Kanoros, 2 other creatures that work really good in the deck. Kanoros just has, you know, it's just a lot of keyword abilities. The Graveyard Hate isn't going to hurt us. I double checked with everything and I think I got it. Alenda, again, is doing the +1/+1 counters thing, right? So we mutate on top of our Alenda and basically have a Double Strike lifelink creature that whenever another creature dies, we put a +1/+1 counter on top of it, right? And also, because that power is increased, when Alenda dies, we get that many more tokens. Again, for anyone who doesn't know, the name replaces, okay? So where it says when a Lenda dies, basically it's when this creature dies, right? It's considered one creature. Spike Shot Elder and Dreadhorde Arcanist, again, just cards that really want their power to be bigger. I thought they would be interesting includes because your Spike Shot Elder is just going to deal more damage. Dreadhorde Arcanist, when it attacks, we can cast an instant or sorcery card with converted mana cost less than or equal to Dread Arcanist's power from our graveyard without paying its mana cost. Again, this is another one that I think should probably go in any mutate deck that it fits into. This is not an instant sorcery deck, but we got lots, and being able to cast almost any of them from our graveyard seems pretty good. I also went with the life gain theme a little bit, okay? Lycia I thought fit great. Again, we can mutate onto this with our commander if we want to. Probably though, I think we cast it after the fact because it's going to cost next to nothing, right? If we just gain the 4 life from our commander, Lycia now costs 4 and we're going to be gaining a ton of life, so I think it fits in the deck. Witch of the Moors, again, this is just every time we cast our commander, our opponents have to sacrifice a creature. Any of the lifelink creatures that we have also, we got lots of lifelink creatures, so that works there too. Angelic Accord is that gain 4 life, so we're hitting that every time we cast our commander, so we're getting an angel token. Well Lost Dreams, we can just draw 4 cards, up to 4 cards if we want to. And again, remember, we do have a lot of other lifelink creatures that we can be getting draws off of. Indulging Patrician, I think, is fantastic in this deck. 1, a white and a black Vampire Noble, 1/4, flying and lifelink. So already it's a good creature to mutate onto. We can mutate it onto it with our Snapdax, and now we're going to have a flying double strike lifelink creature. And at the beginning of your end step, if you gained 3 or more life this turn, each opponent loses 3 life. So right away we mutate onto it, gain 4 life. This will trigger at the end step and our opponents lose 3 life. And then every time we attack with it, it's going to trigger again at the end step, right? So fantastic fit in the deck. And then I threw a few other mutate cards in here. I got Necropanther and Dirge Bat. I thought a few other merge creatures wouldn't hurt. When you merge again, so if our commander's already in play, we can throw a Necropanther on top of it and we'll get both triggers. We'll get both mutate triggers. Porcuparrot I thought was a funny one. Again, because we have so many Death Touch creatures, I thought Porcuparrot was a perfect fit because now we can turn any of those Death Touch creatures into a pinger that is just going to wipe out our opponent's creatures every time we tap it. So that is pretty much it. That is Snapdax. And again, I got the deck list, right? The number 1 vote getter gets an actual deck list. That's in the description below. And of course, the poll is in the description below, right? This is going to be an ongoing thing. So for all the people that are going to be regularly tuning into this series, you probably are going to know how it works, right? The deck list for the number 1 pick is going to be in the description. The poll for the next video is going to be in the description. So go there, vote for the one you want to see. And again, comment which commander you want to see, right? If you want me to add a commander to the next poll, comment below which commander you'd like to see. But that is it for today, and thank you for tuning in.